and I was saying to him I think the best way would be to use some Visual Basic for Applications script. So this video is for him and anyone else who wants to learn how to do it. So starting out with just a brand new presentation in PowerPoint. Let's go ahead and save as. Scoreboard, and you need to save it as a PowerPoint macro enabled presentation, otherwise the code won't run. And then if you're gonna start writing code for PowerPoint, you need to be able to view the developer tab, and by default it's the only tab that's not up here. So in order to show the developer tab, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and then see how developer tab is the only one that's not checked? Check it and hit OK. And now you have some extra features here that allow you to do some cool stuff. However, before we start writing code, let's go and set up our user interface. Get rid of this stuff. Insert. You could insert any shape. You could use these arrows up here. I'm going to use just a regular isosceles triangle here. And you need one button to make the score go up, and you need another button to make the score go down. And then you need another shape, and it could be any shape, but you need a shape that's going to actually display your score. Now, the names of these shapes, it doesn't really matter what they are as long as you know what they are. You can go to your selection pane and then name them score 1, up. Again, you can name these whatever you want, but this makes sense to me. And there we go. What I want is I want the score to show up in this box, and every time I click these arrows up or down, it changes the score. So in order to get in the code, go to the developer tab, go to Visual Basic, and then you're going to right click over here and insert a new module. And most of my projects only have one module. I just write all of my functions in one module. And let's create a variable called score. In Visual Basic, variables are always declared with dim. Don't know what dim stands for, but it works. And then you need to write a little function. So functions start with sub, and then you need a name for your function. Let's create a function called scoreUp. Now, whenever you're creating a new function, you need the keyword sub and the name of the function, and then you need to put parentheses at the end of it. And then when you hit return, it will automatically add the keywords end sub. So all the code in between this sub and this end sub is going to be for the function scoreUp. And all we need to do, when we click on the up arrow, we're just going to say score equals score plus 1. And then we need to, so that's going to make the score go up, but we want the score to be displayed on that rectangle whose name is score. And the way that you tell PowerPoint to update the text in that shape is you say active presentation dot slideshow window dot view dot slide. And when you say dot slide, you're just saying this current slide that I'm on. Dot slide dot shapes. And then inside of this parentheses is where the name of the shape is going to go. And the name of the shape that we want to write text for is score1. And it needs to be in quotation marks. Now, how do I call on the text of that shape? I have to use something called TextFrame.TextRange.Text. And then what do I want to change the text to? I want to change it to score. And in a few minutes, I'm going to try to make another scoreboard a different way. So right now I'm going to call this score1. This is going to be score1, score1, and score1. Okay, that's scoreUp. So change the score number and then update that shape, the scoreboard, with the new score. Now I need to make another function for making the score go down. So it's going to be sub scoreDown, parentheses, return, and then it's going to be very similar to scoreUp. Score1 equals score1 minus 1. And then I could copy and paste this, but I actually don't know how many times I'm going to have to write this code. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control X and cut it. And let's make a brand new function called update score1. And now I'll put this text in here. Now anytime we call update score1, it's going to update the shape called score1 with the new score1 number. So now up here all I have to do is say update score1 and update score1. And one thing you can do is you can check this code. PowerPoint will check the code for any obvious errors. If you go up to debug, compile VBA project, and it will tell you if it sees any obvious errors. If it doesn't see any obvious errors, there might still be some not so obvious errors, but it looks good so far. So now let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Oh, there's one other thing we need to do, and that is we need to set the initial value of score1. So let's create a new subroutine called reset score1. Don't forget the parentheses. And let's set score1 to 0. And then update score1. Now, we need to tell this shape to run the scoreUp code when it's clicked. So the way you do that is by clicking on the shape, left click on the shape, insert, action, run macro, scoreUp. Okay. Now for the down arrow, insert, action, macro, scoreDown. Okay. And the way I'm going to design this is whenever you click on the arrows, it changes the score up or down. Whenever you click on the actual scoreboard, it will reset the score to 0. So now I need to say insert, action, macro, reset score. And now when I go to slideshow and I click on the scoreboard, it sets the score to 0. And when I click the up arrow, it increments up. And when I click the down arrow, it increments down. And obviously that text is too small, so you can use the normal PowerPoint formatting features to make it look better. Now another scoreboard you could make, if you didn't want these arrows here, you could create another shape and call it score2. If you wanted this to update when you clicked it, let's say you knew that the score was never going to go down, it was only going to go up. You could let's create another variable for this score, dim score2. And now we're not using arrows. We're just going to create a function that every time you click on the button, it's just going to make the score go up by 1. Sometimes you don't need the score to go down by 1. You just need it to go up. So let's call this function countUp. Score2 is assigned a new value, the previous score2 value plus 1. And if you wanted to make this increment in tens or 100s, you would just put 10 or 100 here, and it would go up by tens or 100s. But we want 1. And then after the score variable is incremented, you need to change the text in the button. Don't forget, this shape has a different name. Score2. And we're going to change the text to the value of score2. Now this one is going to be a little bit more tricky to initialize. What I think I'm going to do is insert a shape here. And I'm just going to make it invisible by going to Format Shape, Transparency 100, Line, no line. And then I'm going to create an initialization function initialize that just puts score2 equal to 0. And then, of course, the text of the scoreboard needs to update. Text equals score2. Now come back over here to the scoreboard, and this invisible rectangle on top, that's going to get insert action, run macro, score2 initialization. That's going to set score2 to 0, which we only need to do at the very beginning. And then we want, as soon as we click on that invisible rectangle, it's going to set score2 to 0, and then we want it to go away. So we don't need code for that. We can just add a disappear animation. Duration auto. I don't know what auto means. Say 0.01. Start on click. And then for this one, after that invisible rectangle disappears, every time we click on it, we want it to count up. Okay. And run the slideshow. And it sets the score to 0. And then the invisible rectangle disappears because of the animation we put on it. And every time you click on it, it should increment by 1, but it's not. Why? Well, let's see if the code is working. Alright, the code is working. For some reason, the invisible rectangle is just not disappearing the way it's supposed to. And again, you can format that using normal PowerPoint formatting stuff. Disappear. Oh, huh. We need to make this a trigger animation. Trigger the disappear animation on click of rectangle 7. Now when you click on rectangle 7, it will make rectangle 7 disappear. Set to 0 and then increment. And there's one other thing I want to show you, which is what if you wanted a whole bunch of little scoreboards? Let's say you had 6 teams. You wanted to keep track of the scores of all 6 teams, but you didn't want to write the same code 6 times over. You could create a shape. Call it I don't know, score square. And then go into the code. And we only need one function for this, I think. Sub. I don't know. Little square. I don't know. Whatever. And for this one, it might be easiest to declare a variable in the function. I'm going to create a new variable called score3. And score3, this little variable here, what I want it to do is I want it to see what the score in the square is initially, and I want it to add 1 to that number, whatever it is. So first of all, this function needs to take in a little bit of information. It needs to look at the button that you clicked, and the way you get it to do that is to say, all right, when someone clicks on this button, I want you to grab the information for that button and interpret it as shape information. So bring in button information as shape information. And then this score3, I want you to set it to the text on that button. Okay, so if the text is 10, then it's going to grab that information, and that's going to be the current score. And then score3 is equal to score3 plus 1. Then take the text on that button and change it to the new score. Now there's one problem with this, and it has to do with data types. If you're going to do math with the number 10, then it needs to be the number 10. You can't add 1 to the word 10. You can only add 1 to the number 10. And the way to take that 10 and tell the computer to treat it as a number is to say cint parentheses and parentheses. So take this text and turn it into an integer or a number. Then do math on it like you would do a number, and then put it in the text of the box. And we need to tell it what the text is going to be. It's going to be score3. Alright, check for any obvious errors. None. Now, in theory, any little shape that we assign the macro, little score square, we should be able to use as a scoreboard with no changes whatsoever. So, insert action macro little score square. Okay, and we could probably, I'm thinking we could just copy a bunch of these and run it. And now each one works like a little scoreboard, a little counter. Cool, huh? Alright, I hope that's helpful.